This is the CHGO Cubs Podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan, and we are coming to you on Sunday. It is May 19th. The Cubs drop 3 of 4 to the Pittsburgh Pirates over the weekend at Wrigley Field after dropping 2 of 3 in Atlanta to the Braves. Braves coming to Wrigley next, Brendan. So all things considered, not the best week for us to be recapping for the Chicago Cubs. A lot of people are hurt, yada, 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 but not a great week.
Stop making excuses over there, Corey. But listen, this is unfortunately the state of the team right now. Offense has been quiet. Injuries have had a negative effect, yes, but nevertheless, offense, poor showing the past few days here. The hope is you get somewhat healthy, you get the guys who had just returned, stabilize, you win 2 out of 3 against Atlanta coming up, feel a little bit better, but just stay afloat, get through this rough stretch. They are still 4 games above 500, and stay alive is the key phrase of the past few weeks.
Yeah, and here's what we're going to talk about. Generally, we'll start, just kind of general feelings. We have updates. We've heard from Craig Counsell. Our guy Jared Willis was at Wrigley Field today about Dansby, Swanson, Nico, Hoerner, hopefully coming back soon. Nico, of course, not being put on the IL, much to everybody's chagrin. Dansby hopefully being activated. It looks like he's on track for Tuesday. We'll talk about everything going on in the bullpen. We'll talk about the starting staff. We will talk about Morel with a really nice weekend there. Cody Bellinger looking good. We'll talk about it all. Generally, though, Brendan, it's a weird spot because, of course, this was not a good week. You've got 3 more with the Braves. That's going to be tough. And I don't know that I would really. I wouldn't look at it as making excuses. This was not a good week, but I think we knew that this stretch was going to be kind of about treading water a little bit. They got off to a nice start. Even right now, I believe they still currently hold a playoff spot. They've fallen a little further behind Milwaukee than you'd like, but you've got your middle infield out. You recently got back Cody and Seiya like toward the end of last week. And this week you face some good pitching, man. You got Sale and Lopez in Atlanta. You saw Skeens, Keller, Jones this weekend for Pittsburgh. But you also, played some close games and dropping 3 of 4 at the Pirates to the Pirates. I don't care who's hurt or not. At home, that's not really going to cut it. So it's one of those where it's like, I'm kind of just hoping they can tread water and hang in there in all of these races and then hopefully get back to what we've seen when they've been at full health or something close to it. But, there's no sugarcoating it. This was not a good week for this baseball team.
No, not a good week at all. When stretches like this happen that coincide with players who have typically been productive, performing poorly like Ian Happ, it prompts questions of, is this going to continue? Is Ian Happ's poor performance going to continue? Is this poor offensive stretch a sign of what's to come? In the moment, it's difficult to not think that because you are performing so poorly at the plate and dropping 3 out of 4 against the Pirates. The hope, though, as we will talk about, is those guys return to norm. You survive the next week. You get your middle infield back to full health. Dansby not just comes back healthy, but shows those hot stretches of offensive output that we saw last year. And the starting rotation normalizes. Justin Steele gets comfortable. We still see Jameson Taillon show flashes of what we thought he would be. And by the time we're talking about this team in early June, we feel generally positive about this state of the roster. The concern, though, is dropping 3 out of 4 just before Atlanta comes to Wrigley. With some of these offensive underwhelming outings, the concern is that it amplifies and it starts to snowball, and we leave the next week or 2 weeks more negative than we hoped.
Yeah, it's a tough spot. I thought Taillon looked good again on Sunday. I think let down a little bit by the defense. Also a bad call early in that first inning that kind of led to some of those early runs that he didn't really deserve. So I think he looks good. We'll talk about Shota Imanaga, who just, if it's His ERA just keeps getting lower, Brendan. It's like a game on The Price is Right, where it's like it just keeps going lower. It's amazing to watch.
How low can it go?
How low can it go? He was a joy to watch at Saturday at beautiful historic Wrigley Field. We will talk about him. But I don't know. It's a tough spot because you and I were talking before we came on where all offseason, like pretty much I know we did, and I know I'm sure other pundits and people that talk about this team either talked or wrote about, like, we didn't feel that they did truly enough in this offseason to kind of like really make us all feel great and like they were the surefire, no questions asked division champions of this NL Central. And that was a little frustrating, but we also saw at the beginning of this season what their kind of potential could be, that potential ceiling. If Michael Busch was doing some of the things that he was doing, Christopher Morel becoming the player that we're watching him become. He took another nice walk in this game on Sunday, getting on base. Like, he just looks really good. So you see what that ceiling is. But then, and I saw it in the chat that, Dansby and Nico aren't necessarily going to save this offense. They're better than their current options. You need Dansby to be better. You need Happ to get going and keep going. Michael Busch had a very hot start to the season, but his numbers as of late have not been as good as they were at the start. It's a weird spot, Brendan, where the reason I bring all that up is that I kind of felt the entire time if they have significant injuries, this roster wasn't good enough. They're not good enough to sustain that for a complete period of time. They may be able to get through it for little bits and pieces, but they need their stars to be healthy and they need their stars to actually perform. So for whatever you think of Ian Happ or where he ranks or all that other stuff, he's got to be better than this, Brendan. But I'm looking at this weekend, and it's certainly not the sole reason that they're losing, but going up against the pitchers that the Pirates were able to offer when you have a middle infield of Nick Madrigal and Miles Mastroboni, I'm going to be honest with you, it's hard for me to get worked up about them losing games. I'm more concerned about the roster construction and like how we get to that point. But I'm kind of like, yeah, man, I mean, like, it's going to be tough sledding. Like when, three of the hitters in your lineup are kind of automatic outs. And that does lay out some other things I do want to talk about. Want to talk about that situation, the middle infield in particular. Want to talk about the catcher situation that has gotten pretty rotten pretty fast. Maya started the season well. Yan Gomes had a really good year last year, but that has all deteriorated very quickly. And also I saw it in the chat too. Want to talk about Brennen Davis. Brennen Davis is on an absolute tear in AAA. It's really nice to see. Couldn't be happening to a better guy. So we'll talk about it. But I'll throw it to you just again, some more general thoughts. I see mentions of Luis Vasquez in the chat. I know we've talked about him and things like that. While you do that, I'm going to try to close the blind.
I was going to say.
Because it keeps shining. So you talk about that, and I'll be.
You lead me to the chat. I appreciate that.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But 3 topics come to mind when we review this series. The first is, like many who watch these games, is frustration. It's frustration watching the offense put up a few base hits in those last 2 games. 1-0 win on Saturday, and then on Sunday have that performance. Very frustrating. The second is, 26-22, still a decent place to be in despite all of the injuries and despite Ian Happ performing poorly and Dansby Swanson performing poorly offensively. Still a good place to be in addition to the bullpen being underwhelming. And then the third is, I start to imagine what could happen if a lot of the performances do stabilize, because you have Christopher Morel still showing positive plate discipline. You still have Mike Tauchman performing very well and looks as if he's a guy Kirk Counsell is leaning heavily on, not just to get at bats, but bat leadoff and get a consistent role in this lineup, whether he be playing the outfield or DH. Then I start looking at what are the potential guys on this roster in AAA. What are their potential? Pete Crow-Armstrong is exceeding expectations. The outfield is fully healthy, and he's still on this team. Brennen Davis, red hot in Iowa right now. What could his role be? And there's a lot of ways that this roster can work out. That's what leaves me generally optimistic. At the same time, I'm reminded of what happened during this period last year when they went to Houston. It preceded one of the worst stretches, and it required the Cubs to go on an absolute tear before the trade deadline to justify the front office making improvements. So it's a lot of balancing acts going on, but when push comes to shove, I'm still left with an encouraging mindset. Not one without concerns, yes, but generally optimistic about the next few weeks.
Yeah. I keep saying it. It's a weird spot, because again, I see it in the chat too. Patrick in the YouTube chat says this is what happens when you don't act like a big market team in the offseason. And he mentioned Soto as, like a star they could have acquired. We don't have to relitigate the entire offseason, but that's what I'm saying. Like, we knew this team needed a lot to go right. They had some big question marks. Michael Busch at first base, Christopher Morel at third base, Shota coming over from, his first year in the majors, coming over from Japan. Obviously, that has gone really well. The Busch thing is kind of up and down as he's been streaky to start the season and where he's at now. Christopher Morel looks really good. But on the injury side, you've been hurt by a lot of that. And the lack of that star bat, Seiya looks really good. Cody Bellinger looks really good. But Dansby wasn't hitting when he was healthy. Ian Happ is really scuffling at the plate right now. And you need those kind of complementary pieces. You need it all to kind of be going right in order for this all to work. And when some of it isn't going right, guys aren't hitting, things like that, and you have so many guys on the injured list, I guess it's just I'm not that upset that they would go through a week like this because, as you said, they're still in a decent position record-wise and standings-wise. And no duh, right? Like with a team like this, like they just can't afford too many guys to be out. They can only kind of get through that so many times. Eventually it's going to come back around. So this was a tough weekend. Pirates pitching is good, but you lost a couple one-run games. Kyle Hendricks was not good in the game on Friday. You kind of stole the one on Saturday. So yeah, the offense needs to pick up this pitching staff. One thing I didn't think I heard you mention, Ben Brown looked really good. He continues to look really good in this kind of longer relief role. I think there's obviously some big potential there. So there is a lot that's going well for this team. But as you're dealing with guys scuffling and hopefully guys coming back this week, it's going to be about treading water. Our guy Luke Stuckmeyer for a while had been saying, like, if they can get through May being around 500, kind of still, keeping themselves afloat in all of these races, hopefully get everybody healthy and, really kind of turn things on. And, I think that's a fine way to look at it. I guess to me, Brendan, basically what I mean is if you're looking at this lineup with Madrigal and Mastroboni in the middle infield, Happ not hitting, things like that, what do you expect? You know what I mean? Why are you expecting them to put up 10 runs a game? Like, I don't see how that's going to happen. So I'm not that upset about it. It's like, yeah.
The expectation or the confident projection was a mid-80s win team. So to move expectations from 85 to 92 requires extreme outcomes, 30th percentile type outcomes. That includes high performances from Shota. Well, you can check that box off. It includes high performances from Morel. Well, you can check that box off given the underlying plate discipline, hard hit numbers, and value he's continuing to ride as a stable cleanup hitter for Craig Counsell. You can check all those boxes off. Ben Brown, another box you can check off. Pete Crow-Armstrong, some people in the chat are like, what's going on with Pete Crow-Armstrong? The improvements that are exceeding expectations are twofold. He was called up as a defensive replacement, not because he deserved the promotion, but because Cody Bellinger and the outfield were injured. Pete Crow-Armstrong gets called up. All of a sudden, he's making better than league average contact, when for the past 2 years, he was whiffing more than your typical player. So he's adjusting at the big league level while providing quite literally the best defensive value in the outfield and the fastest speed of any base runner in the league. You saw the value today. Pinch runs for Michael Busch in the bottom of the ninth inning, immediately steals second base. He's already provided more value than the Cubs had imagined, given that Counsell said he was not called up due to him earning it early on. That's what I mean. I'm always in my evaluation of the team looking at the performances that were not expected. And those are the performances that were not expected. Unfortunately, it's also coming at a time when I did not expect the bullpen to perform this poorly, nor did I expect the offense from Ian Happ and Dansby Swanson to be this low early on. So it's a balancing act, but it's still, which might prompt some eye rolls from fans, it is still somewhat early, and you're getting a lot of unexpected positive performances that have to change the outlook of the team. It's not a 90-win team right now. The potential's there. My hope was they would be a 94-plus win team, make aggressive, riskier, perhaps trades during last offseason. But this is the state of the roster, and we have to discuss it as it currently is.
Yeah, and, look, just to get this point out there, I want to read a couple of the YouTube chats, and then we'll hit our first break. We have plenty to talk about. This is probably going to be a long episode. I don't like to make promises on that, but when we have stuff to talk about, we find the time to talk about it.
I got a pack to go to Chicago over here. You're moving, aren't you? We want to do a 3-hour episode today?
We got to do for the people in the Sunday live YouTube chat. If you're in the live YouTube chat, throw us a thumbs up, hit that like button if you're listening on your podcast feeds later on Sunday or Monday morning. Hello. We're happy to have you. So I wanted to say, Ian Happ currently rocking a 625 OPS. It is rough sledding out there for Ian Happ. I think in general, obviously frustrated on that. But for what he's done the last couple years, he's paid pretty correctly for what a 3.5-ish win player is able to offer. He's a streaky guy. He goes through these kind of streaks, and I understand that, because he's not a 30, 40 homer guy or a big average guy, maybe he's not someone people look at and love seeing the contract, or I understand why Ian Happ is a divisive player, I guess is what I mean. But he's paid pretty correctly with what market value is for a corner outfielder that puts up about 3.5 wins above replacement and does the things that he does. Again, it's sort of the same thing when we talk about Dansby Swanson. Ian Happ is not a star. He is not the cornerstone of a lineup. Unfortunately, especially when Seiya and Cody Bellinger were hurt, that's what the Cubs kind of need him to be. That's not really his fault. That's Jed's fault. And what I was going to say is, like, as far as when guys get hurt and your depth isn't as good as you'd like it to be, or they don't have a star in the lineup, there's like 6 months of off-season episodes of Brendan and I, and I think the rest of the CHGO Cubs crew, complaining about some of the stuff in the off-season and the lack of like getting that bona fide absolute superstar and things like that. So I don't want to relitigate that. Like I've already offered.
Listen, it's been 2 months since the off-season ended. So you got to talk about the current state of the team right now. So I'm just saying, like, I agree, I'm aware, but it's May. We got to just kind of talk about the team. It doesn't matter. So, but I did want to, and also because I really like this person's YouTube name, Steiner Math. That is a wrestling reference for you, Brendan. Thanks. Really good one. So I appreciate your YouTube name there, Steiner Math. He threw in the chat, Morel's batting .210 with an OPS around 710. Don't act like he's Juan Soto. I do just want to point to that. Definitely not Juan Soto. I wish that he was. But I think the reason we're really highlighting what Morel's doing and feeling excited about it is that that's coming after a really rough stretch. His numbers plummeted. So like the fact that they're even around there is good, that he's kind of digging his way out of a pretty sizable hole that he dealt himself. But I think the bigger thing is, where he's going to rank on things like exit velocity. He smashes the ball. He hits really hard line drives. His contact is really good. And then you look at the fact that he's rocking about an 11% walk rate and a 20% K rate. A 20% K rate would be down about 11% from last year and 12% from 2022. So just really good trends to monitor with him. Of course, he is not performing at that absolute star level, but for a 24-year-old that had, as he was coming up and even making his debut at the major league level,
concerning trends. He looked like a guy who might strike out 40% of the time, but have a lot of power, kind of like a Patrick Wisdom situation. What he's showing you this year is that he's making those adjustments. So definitely not Juan Soto, definitely not where you want him to be in terms of the overall line, but the trends look really good. And if he can stay in that approach and really buy into what he's doing at the plate and keep that confidence, the numbers will come. They will be there eventually, and he will be a very strong force for this offense. So that's kind of why we talk about Morel the way that we do. Let's hit our first ad break here because we're running a little long. Yes, I see it from everybody in the chat. The catcher situation is bad. Ian Happ is not hitting well. We're yelling about a lot today. Throw it in the chat. We're going to get to it, and we'll get to the good as well. But let's hit our first ad break here. We'll come back. And I think when we come back, Brennen, let's talk about the middle infield situation, because I do see some chatter about, like, why didn't Nico hit the injured list? Where is Dansby? Why do these two play every day in the middle infield? So we'll talk about that immediately when we come back from this break.
Get ready for the season ahead with quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. I have these light brown shades, Corey. I wear them almost every day. Really like them. Plus, if your shades ever go missing, if you're like me, you forget your shades somewhere, well, Shady Rays has the most insane protection program in all of eyewear. Every pair is backed by lost or broken replacements. And exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com. Use code CHGO for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself. The shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Penrose Brewing, Geneva, Illinois. Seltz Up, hard seltzers with real fruit, led by Lemon Seltz Up, a national gold medal winning hard seltzer with real lemons. They created our unique twist on a lemon shake-up with a house-made hard seltzer and pureed lemons for a throwback to warm weather and county fairs. It's going to be like 85 in Chicago on Tuesday. Very hot. Get one of these. I will need more of these seltzers when I'm in the studio, Corey. And they also are available in a lemon tea up, a half and half inspired hard seltzer. Just released this year is also a transfusion seltz up inspired by a popular golf cocktail with grape, ginger, and lime. Penrose is available at your local brewing and beverage retailer, or visit Penrose's taproom in Geneva. For more information, go to penrosebrewing.com or follow them on social media at Penrose Brewing.
All right, Brennen, let's talk about the IL situation with Nico. I saw, I think it was Brett from Bleacher Nation tweet this out in reference to lyrics from the wonderful rock band The Who. Meet the new Cubs, same as the old Cubs. And that was in reference to, this is just something they've been doing for a long time. They don't put a guy on the IL, and it gets very close to the full 10 days, the IL stint, and he's not useful off the bench, but they don't put him on the IL. I believe the logic here with Nico was that they weren't sure about the Dansby situation and whether he would be on target. So if Nico could have felt good, they didn't want to lose him for those extra days with Dansby already being out. Now, the problem, though, is that they've played 6 games, down a man on the roster. And as we've seen, there were certain spots, Sunday would have been one of them, where runner on second instead of Patrick Wisdom would be a wonderful spot for Nico Hoerner to come in and try to drive PCA in from second. We don't see him. The rest of this weekend, we don't see him. So he's clearly not available off the bench. Even in like an emergency, he is not available. So you play down for 6 games. Dansby appears to be on target for Tuesday to return, but Nico would have been eligible, I think, just after this Braves series ends. So I am not a fan of this. I'm sure there is a deeper logic that maybe Jed just doesn't care to put out to the public. But as you and I have mentioned a million times, they used to do this with Rizzo and Chris Bryant relentlessly, almost like it was like a rib on all of us, like reading this every day. I just don't really get this. Like, playing down a man when your roster is not, an elite roster in the first place just doesn't make any sense to me. And you have, I think Mastroboni's done a pretty decent job filling in at short defensively. He's made some nice plays. His arm looks pretty good. Not making all the plays, of course. Madrigal way too slow on that double play the other day for Justin Steele. But like in general, he's fine at second base. Like it's not the end of the world. The offense, though, dreadful from the two of them. Just an absolute black hole with whoever's playing catcher, who also that position is not offering anything in the offensive perspective. Just a black hole. So I don't know. I mean, there must be some logic to why Luis Vasquez is not getting an opportunity. At the very least, you'd be getting a good defender that you'd be bringing up, more potential as an offensive hitter. Might struggle just the same, but you've got two guys that are, putting up what? I'm not looking. I know Madrigal's is in like the 540s. Mastro's is probably lower than that, but just like dreadful offensive producers right now. And playing them every day up the middle, there has to have been a better option than just leaving Nico Hoerner sitting on the bench and not having, even if it wasn't a middle infielder, just another bench bat or something to provide to this team. I don't understand why they do this. I'll never understand why they do this, but here we are. They're doing it again.
The alternative might be Morel, second base, Wisdom, third base, or Bush, third base, if you want to be a little bit riskier and you protect the offense by taking away one of Mastrobuoni or Madrigal's bats. Those two right now are not Major League Baseball players. Madrigal is a complete liability on the base paths. His bat in almost 3 years now is one of the worst bats in Major League Baseball. I understand there's a lot of fans of Madrigal. I sympathize with the feelings of him struggling. I get it, but he does not earn a roster spot right now. He's one of the worst hitters I've seen in a Cubs uniform quite some time. It's very reminiscent of what we saw from Eric Stogard for years, and VR and Descalso and all those. Madrigal does not deserve to be on the roster right now. Mastrobuoni is a complete disaster at shortstop. He should not be playing shortstop on any Major League team right now. The 3 plays or lack thereof in Saturday and Sunday were awful. It shows no calibration for an internal clock. Some of the throws were pitiful. The footwork is awful. They can do better. And for me, of course, this is coming off harsh. I understand that. But this team prides itself on defense, prides itself on weak contact. And you put 2 infielders who have performed extremely and unexpectedly poor defensively right now. So the alternative may have been Luis Vasquez. The alternative is, again, maybe not defensively, but you protect the lineup. You put Morel at second base. But what's clear right now going forward is Madrigal and Mastroboni is likely to produce some of the worst outputs overall of any middle infield duo in the league.
It's a word we've used before, but those two being the middle infield basically for an entire week is unserious. It's unserious. And, look, as much as I've ranted about Nick Madrigal, you guys know how I feel about that. Brendan just did a good job of that. Like, Mastro has a 372 OPS right now, a 16 WRC plus. It's just dreadful. Take your pick. So we did have a super chat from friend of the show, Steven Nagishi. We appreciate that, Steven. Always good to see you in the chat. If you had to DFA, which one, Mastro or Madrigal? Sophie's choice. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. But I would also say both of them have options, so you wouldn't have to do that. They both have 2 minor league options. You just don't have to have them on the team. Now, granted, in looking at some of the stuff from like the minor league guys and the folks that write, it's not like that they have like this bevy of middle infield options to call up. But the bar is nothing, Brendan. I mean, these are just dreadful performers. They're both sub-replacement level. Madrigal slightly more in the negative WAR column than Mastroboni. They're just not good. And they've gotten an opportunity. You see flashes every now and again of like what they could be if, hypothetically they put it all together, but they don't. It doesn't happen in reality. And this team is desperate for more offensive production. The defense has caused problems at times from both of them. You cannot be serious and continue running those guys out. I don't care how, injuries happen. Of course they do. But if this was your backup plan, it's not a good enough backup plan. And it's May. You got to get that figured out because Nico might get, Nico and Dansby may need more time off later in the year. You have to have better depth at the middle infield position than what you are trotting out there every day. I do want to read this from Craig Counsell. I got this from our guy, Jared Willis. You can check out all his work at allchgo.com, of course, along with our guy, Ryan Herrera. From Craig Counsell today on Nico Hoerner. I think Nico's doing well. We're having positive days, and so I think Tuesday looks good right now. And assuming today goes well. And the goal is to just get it behind him. I think we have a chance to do that on Tuesday. We're hoping Tuesday that both Swanson and Hoerner are in the lineup.
That would be nice.
So that's part of the reason that they don't put Nico on the IL. But at that point, you're saving, 2 games, Brendan?
Listen.
I don't get it. You're a major league team. You have several levels of your minor league system. You should never play down a man unless it is just completely unnecessary. And for this team, it's not. You're starting garbage at second base and shortstop every night, and try anything else. Anything else? What's the worst that happens? Somebody comes up and is also a negative WAR player? It's almost impossible to put up a lower OPS than Mastroboni's putting up right now. So
the ideas with Mastrobuoni and Madrigal going into the season were understandable. And in fact, Counsell was using Madrigal, I thought, in a role that was his optimal use before the injuries happened.
Yeah.
So Madrigal, defensive replacement, late inning at third base. On average, when you scale his plate appearances to games played, about 1 and 2 plate appearances per game, I thought it was fine. I thought that's a role for him. I understand. And with his ability to make contact and the potential for better offense, despite not seeing it, I understood the role. The context, though, has changed. The context is a struggling offense, injuries up the middle, with a large sample of bad offensive output. This is not a role player anymore. This is a player who's eating starts up the middle way too often. So I do think you have to reevaluate the logic going into the year has to change. It's been 2 months and you're seeing continuous problems that have been shown for multiple years now in Madrigal and Mastroboni. Now, is Luis Vasquez an obvious decision? No, Luis Vasquez's bat projects to be below league average too. But what's clear with Luis Vasquez is that his defense is not a question mark. In fact, his defense, by many standards, is probably better than that of a league average defender. So when I see Mastroboni fumbling over his feet, pop-ups, I'm thinking it's an adventure out there with him trying to catch him. I'm thinking, man, can't we do better than this? And so that's where the frustration comes with the moves. And I think from what you're saying, from the lack of using an IL spot, because it did hurt the Cubs today. It's just one game, but Taillon had to leave early due to horrible infield defense yet again. And this, for a team that prides itself on weak contact and defense, we have to ensure that opportunities for pitchers to succeed are there, and providing them with that defense is not good enough. It's going to decrease the chance of the entire staff having success. Yeah.
And I don't know, look, like whether it's someone like even, Alexander Canario, someone like that, like bring up some pop, like as you said, like this team doesn't need contact right now or just like bat to ball skills, which, in Madrigal's case weren't really working anyway, even in the lesser role. But like, it's just not a skill this team needs. This team needs to score runs. They're having trouble scoring runs on a consistent basis. And the answers that they have right now just aren't up to that task. So yeah, the IL thing is just always going to be frustrating to me. I think you go back to years like 2016 when the Chicago Cubs won the World Series.
That
Lineup was so deep and obviously so good that it wasn't as much of a concern if they decided to do something like that, because it was generally the same 8 or 9 guys every day anyway. And if they were without one of them, they would probably still win by 4 or 5 runs anyway. So it wasn't that big of a deal. But right now, this roster is not good enough to just say, nah, we don't need that spot. Every other team has this many guys on their roster that are healthy and ready to play today, but we can do one less. You're not good enough for that. I don't understand. And what's the worst that would have happened? If Nico's ready on Tuesday and you had IL'd him, but he was ready on Tuesday, so then he's out 2 games. So then we see 2 games of Dansby and someone else at second base versus 6 games with Nico Hoerner just sitting on the bench with his glove on, as we always see in the dugout. He's got his cleats and his glove on, but they don't let him use them. So,
well, I don't know. This is your frustration might be directed at the medical staff. Listen, you're not a doctor.
They don't control the IL, do they? I mean, unless they're telling them he's going to be healthy in 2 days.
Well, they get input from the medical staff. You're not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. I don't know, but we have a 5+ year sample.
You have a doctorate.
I do. You don't want to trust me with medical advice, do you? Do you want to trust me with medical advice? I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. But if I want to let my fan out a little bit, it's been frustrating. They got PJ Mainville's medical staff kind of missing the mark over the years.
All right.
I know. But we might get sued.
Yeah. So I don't know. I get the frustration. I think ultimately it's a difficult spot. They're, record-wise, and again, where they sit in terms of the standings, still a good place to be. What you really need to focus on, and hopefully getting Dansby back and Nico this week. Again, tough series coming up with the Braves, but you just have to avoid this slide going too far and taking them too deep. These things are going to happen. It's May. Like, this series was not like some must-win series where now the season is over, they're sellers at the deadline or anything like that. Like, pump the brakes, pull out a little bit. But spirals like this have, in certain seasons, they have a tendency to continue if you don't have that stopper in the rotation or you don't turn things around on offense. And so what they, of course, need to avoid is this slide continuing and taking them further to the point where we are looking at some of these standings going, shoot, like they've dug themselves a little bit of a hole. Like this stretch was kind of, a bit of a killer for them. I don't expect that. But all I'm saying is, like, it's May. It's okay. This was a very bad week and a frustrating week, but just have to keep it all in perspective and not let this spiral too far out of control. What else is everyone yelling about? We'll hit our second ad break in a second here. I do want to touch on the catcher situation. It's something that's come up a bit, and it's a bit of a bummer. So Yan Gomes is going to be 37 in a couple months. Right now, he's got a slash line of 182, 191, 288, which is good for a 32 WRC plus. He has been also a sub replacement level player, so negative WAR, and that is in 23 games of action for the Cubs so far. Miguel Amaya, his platoon partner, has played in 32 games. He's got a slash line of 187, 248, 297, which is good for a 56 WRC plus. He is also just slightly below replacement level, also negative WAR. So catcher, tough position, often not one that you're looking at for the best offensive production. Of course, the Cubs recently had a catcher who could put up offense. The Brewers have that particular catcher's brother, who is right now one of the better hitters in the league, which is a real bummer, because that was also a trade that the Cubs just sat out and didn't participate in which I think 2 catchers that can hit moved, but I digress. We don't have to relitigate that one either. Brendan, do we?
If you want, we can.
Either way, that's a problem. Neither of them are hitting. Yan Gomes, unfortunately, the aging curve hit him real quick. He was good for the Cubs last year, very clutch for the Cubs last year, ended up putting up a 95 WRC plus, so he's almost a league average hitter. The skills look like they have kind of vanished, Brendan, a little bit, and that's unfortunate. But 37, these things happen. But I remember looking at a graph of like his bat speed. The chart went like this, like it has nosedived this year. So the age kind of looks like it caught up to him. And baseball, of course, is a game where when the speed gets past you, it's very difficult to be good in this game. I think his framing is not rating well this year. It's been tough sledding for Yan Gomes, but he's 37. That's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you probably might have wanted a contingency plan for that as opposed to relying on a 37-year-old catcher. Miguel Amaya, tougher to, I think, for me to have a full read on, because this is his first year getting, full MLB action and getting this many starts. Obviously, he's kind of taken over a little bit. He's like slightly ahead if you were calling one of them the starter versus the other. But last year, we were thrilled that he was even in the majors and like succeeding and showing us things in the majors. He had so many injuries when he was a prospect, and his status was up and down. And at one point, I think a lot of us had kind of written him off, kind of like, well, he's just dealing with too many injuries. This is tough for him to get up. And so I want to give him the time to adjust, and I want to have that proper time. But neither of these guys are throwing anybody out on the bases. They get run all over at will.
One of the issues.
Yeah. And neither of them are hitting. So these are things that on certain teams, like, yeah, that's fine. You have a catcher that's back there to frame and be a good catcher. And, right now, obviously, the Cubs starting staff as a group has been one of the better staffs in the league. And these are the guys catching them. But the framing numbers for Gomes don't look great. They're not throwing any runners out, and they can't hit. And so especially in this time, it compounds those other issues when we're talking about your middle infield's hurt, and you're playing Mastroboni and Madrigal every day. That bottom of the order, Brendan, is 3 automatic outs on a daily basis, which takes us back to last year when they had a 6 through 9 or a 7 through 9 that was also 3 automatic outs for the first 2 or 3 months of the season.
Miguel Amaya's offense, I don't think is totally alarming. Of course, you want better output. That's undeniable. The production is not there. You need the results. The projection going forward with him, I think you can look at and understand that there's reason to be maybe optimistic. That's a funny
Just a great comment from Donnie in our YouTube chat. My Polaroid camera has a better chance of framing than our 2 clowns, referring to the catchers.
All right.
I respect Yan Gomes and Miguel Amaya. I don't know if I would call them clowns, but they're not performing very well.
Yeah. I mean, you look at Amaya, though. If you like bat speed, if you like exit velocity, I know we're getting called nerds over here and we're at fault for breaking the game or whatever. Just want to let you know, Nick Madrigal, I have an 8-2000 over there. I can go field ground balls better than Mastroboni. Okay,
wow.
So easy over there. It's a Sunday. I'm trying to enjoy my Sunday over here. Anyway, with Amaya, hard hit, having good contact, above average contact, I could see the results getting better. I can. It needs to get better, or you may need to have some conversations about improving some of the offensive output with Yan Gomes reversing. But I don't have much ire towards the catching position. I'll be frank. The game calling, I think Yan Gomes is instrumental in the development of pitchers. I think that's kind of behind the scenes, but the sequencing, you can look towards Javier Assad as one pitcher who benefits greatly from optimal sequencing, and that is in due part from having a catching unit that includes Gomes in the history and the experience. My ire is not towards those two. If it's July and you're getting really bad offensive output, then of course, maybe you do want to improve the catching offensive output by a trade, but I think there's more pressing issues and worrying about Miguel Amaya and Yan Gomes and their offense, especially when Miguel Amaya is not whiffing at extremely concerning rates. And if he were hitting weak baseballs consistently, then maybe we would have different conversations.
Yeah, and I think, look, Amaya's 25, and I think all things considered, you'd like to give him a little more time to see how the offense can come along, to see how he can continue developing as a major league catcher. Again, it's one of those unfortunate things that because Gomes is looking like his age has caught up with him so quickly and so drastically, that's putting a lot more of the burden on Miguel Amaya to kind of adjust and improve all of these things very quickly. As I said, these are typically, this stuff with catchers are things that you can kind of look past as long as they're dealing with the pitching staff well, controlling the running game, and handling things behind the plate. That all is not happening. And in addition to that, you have weak spots in the lineup that another non-hitting position is really difficult to handle on a day-to-day basis. So, yeah, as we said, it puts a portion in the lineup where it's just like an absolute black hole in the lineup, which is not something that you want. And when you just, you have a weekend where you lose a few one-run games, you start to look at that and go, yeah, like this is a real problem. Like we have 3 automatic outs in certain portions of this lineup. So the catcher stuff is difficult to address, though. As we said, the Murphy trade, William Contreras, things like that. I wish the Cubs had been in on that. I wanted them to be at the time. They were not. So it's difficult to address that. Not every team has a strong hitting catcher. So that's not always the easiest position to address. That was also part of one of the reasons, even though obviously his defense had some problems, that was part of the argument when people were advocating for keeping Wilson Contreras, was he hits, and this is difficult to find, whether you think he's a good defensive catcher or things like that. He throws runners out, he hits, and it's not easy to just go into your minor league system or in free agency and pluck a catcher in there that's going to handle all of those things. So here we are, a few years later, trying to figure out how to deal with that. So that's the stuff. Let's hit our second ad break here. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit of Brennen Davis. We can talk about Brent Brown's role. And I think at some point, we got to talk about just how good Shota Imanaga looks. We have to have some positives on this podcast.
It's grilling season. Get your pork. People who are active need more protein than the average American. In fact, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, Dietitians of Canada, and the American College of Sports Medicine recommend 1.2 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day for athletes, depending on training. Elevate your protein game with lean pork, a powerhouse of natural goodness. Savor the flavor, savor the gains, and celebrate any occasion by enjoying the best pork produced by Illinois pig farmers. From your sausage and bacon for breakfast to pulled pork or juicy chops hot off the grill, it's an entire season dedicated to pork and the people behind the product. This is paid for by the Illinois pork producers. Generations of commitment. Some beers can say they're brewed for baseball, but only Blue Moon is brewed by baseball. Its bold flavor, bright explosion of color, and iconic orange slice ritual guarantee a one-of-a-kind beer experience. Perfect for spring weather. I'm going to be in studio, Corey, with you on Tuesday. Maybe we can do some Blue Moon beer bats. Maybe we have some orange slices to put on those as well. You can bring the ballpark to you with Blue Moon Belgian-style wheat ale. It's one of a kind every time. Blue Moon, delivered by visiting get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO to see your delivery options. That's get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO. Blue Moon, made brighter. Celebrate responsibly. Blue Moon Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Baseball season is officially underway, and there's no better way to cash in on the action than with Prize Picks. Add your favorite players from the diamond to your Prize Picks lineup all season long. Prize Pick also offers injury insurance so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players get injured. For baseball games, if you have a player who registers 2 plate appearances or less, which really should be Nick Madrigal, Prize Picks will have your back and not count that as a loss. But, you want to risk it. You think Nick Madrigal will hit a home run? Maybe it's a plus 3 million line. Prize Picks might be your place to do it. You can download the app and use code CHGO for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CHGO for a first deposit match up to $100.
All right, Brendan, our YouTube chat has, at least in some part, turned on one Jed Hoyer. I hope Jed doesn't read our YouTube comments.
I'm sure he does. I'm sure he prints them out and looks at them every morning.
So I want to switch to some positive. And it all ties in together. So we can continue talking about some of these things. But I think just wrapping up that last kind of section, you need Nico back. You need Dansby back. When Dansby's back, he's got to hit better than he was. And you need guys like Ian Happ to figure out what is going on. The catcher position has not been good, but that should not be necessarily something that we have to focus on. It might just be something we deal with and figure out as the season goes on if it doesn't get better, but it shouldn't be dragging this team down as much as it feels like it is right now. Happ's got to produce. Dansby's got to come back and produce. Those are just things that have to happen. There's only so many areas on this team that are easy, at least potentially, to interchange players. Those depth pieces at the bottom of the roster, you can swap them out for other guys. You have all these prospects knocking at the door. You have other guys maybe that could deserve an opportunity. Guys like Mastroboni and Nick Madrigal don't have to play. You can try other options. They don't have other options at the catcher position right now, and Ian Happ's going to play. Like Dansby Swanson's your shortstop. Those guys need to produce at least at their league or career levels for this team to succeed. There's no way around it. They have to come back, they have to produce, and they have to be the players that they are paid to be. It's that simple. And that will go a long way toward fixing some of this stuff. But I want to talk about something that has gone really well, which is Shota Imanaga. This looks like just an incredible signing. For as much as we're, maybe yelling about Jed Hoyer or some of the decisions they make.
But I will say on that point,
sure,
it's such a weird balance right now, right? Everyone's pissed off. They're 26 and 22.
Yeah.
Right? It's like sometimes when we talk about this, I'm reminded of like our friend Jeff Everson, who kind of like points to some of the extremes on Cubs Twitter as if everything's so bad. They're 26 and 22.
Sure.
Going into the year, 84, 85 win team. What did you expect? Yeah. If you expected them to be 10, 15 games above 500, you're living in fantasy land. In fact, I want to join your reality.
Yeah. I think that the counter to that is going to be that some stuff has gone well and their record is in a decent spot, but some of the things that people were concerned about through the offseason or not happy about is why they're not in a better spot. Being in a better spot is that. Right there. A lot of people were concerned about the bullpen coming into the season, and it has caused them problems. A lot of people were concerned about that lack of like stud offensive power, and that has cost them some games. So I think a lot of people might say, I didn't necessarily expect better, but they could have solved some of these things, and this team would be in a better spot. Had they acted perhaps a little more like we wanted them to in the offseason, you could have alleviated some of these concerns. We wouldn't be talking about some of these things because they wouldn't be costing them games. That's what I think the counter argument would be.
Yes, of course, but still, context has changed. And that's where I keep pointing to, where sometimes the context has changed so dramatically that it gets washed away by the poor performances.
Yeah,
the fact that we're talking about Juan Soto and Christopher Morel, and that's the comparison, and the negative to Christopher Morel is astonishing, given where Morel was a year ago. Yeah. Similar to talking about Shota Imanaga, which we just will about to do, we're talking about him in Cy Young conversations. Context has significantly changed. The entire outfield is healthy right now, and P. Crow-Armstrong is on the team. So we have to kind of move the sliders, if you will, of what potentially could happen. I've critiqued Jed in the front office. You know my feelings on this.
I do.
I like fast turnover when it comes to this. If this does not work by the end of the year, I'm completely fine moving away from the front office. But at the same time, I recognize that a lot of the bets they have made have worked out. It's just I wish they added to those bets with some more predictable outcomes, and it just hasn't happened yet. But I think we can talk about all this stuff with some semblance of surprising optimism with several of their players right now. And I hope that does not get washed away.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I do think, Steven in the YouTube chat says the problem is that the Cubs do, half measures and not
I've been right there with you.
Their issues. And I do think that does sum it up. Again, not to relitigate the offseason because it's May and they're playing pretty well. This week wasn't good, but generally they're playing pretty well. It's been a decent start to the season. I do agree with that. Like if you had more aggressively and safely kind of addressed your bullpen issues, which was an issue last year, perhaps you're not dealing with blowing so many saves and giving away so many games.
I think
had you not just bet on, hey, we're going to trade for a top prospect in Michael Busch and put him at first base, and we're going to re-sign Bellinger, and been more aggressive in improving your offense, perhaps we're not having some of these conversations.
It's an entire system of years, though, right? Like, how do you build? Look at the closers across the league. The majority of closers who were successful last year suck.
It is a mess
this
right
year.
Now, yeah.
Suck
I have
this
Edwin
year.
Diaz on my fantasy team. So
everyone's closers are screwing their fantasy teams. So what is the alternative? You can point to more of like an infrastructure problem, perhaps, although the Cubs have been quite good producing overall value from guys who are not being paid that much out of the bullpen the past 3 years. But this is not just a one-off season thing. It's not they should have done this, they should have done that. It's a multifaceted discussion here. Sure. But when we move along as we enter June, move the goalpost, talk about what's going well, what's not going well, the surprising performances. I don't want to talk about this team and the lack of moves they made this offseason. I really don't want to do that anymore. I'm tired of seeing what they should have done and what they should not have done. We are at a point entering June where the entire roster is being used in a way that we did not discuss in the offseason. So we have to move along here and talk about the reality instead of fantasy land that was the offseason.
All right. Well, no, yeah, fine. So I want to read one from the YouTube chat. This one from Nick. He says, here we go. Don't panic. It's just May. Fast forward to September. If they just won one more game, they would be in the playoffs. So right now, I would definitely tell you not to panic. It's May. They're in a good spot in the standings. What I would say, though, is when Dansby and Nico come back, if this type of play continues, especially the lack of consistent offense, then I might tell you to panic. All I think I'm saying today in general is with the amount of injuries that they've had and not having their middle infield, and this is coming, they just got Seiya and Cody back, so they were without those two guys for a little while too. I just can't really expect them to survive that in a completely healthy way. It makes total sense that they would struggle to score some runs and have some issues. If guys get healthy and this continues and Happ does not figure it out soon, things like that, then yeah, it's going to be a problem. I won't sugarcoat that. But I think right now it's still too early in the season and enough has gone right. You need them to try to see what they can do at their full potential. But I understand if people are not happy with how this week has gone and their optimism is waning. I understand that. We're all watching the same games. We all watch the same team. I get it. So I do want to talk about Shota, though. He deserves the time. He deserves to be highlighted for how good he is doing. Just unbelievable, Brennen. A 0.84 ERA. Saturday was one of those games where the offense was basically like, hey, Shota, you need to be perfect today because we are not really going to do anything. And he said, okay, fine, no problem. You got it. However long you need me to go. He ends up going, 6 innings? Threw a lot of pitches, but just another really, really good game for Shota Imanaga. 7 innings, 4 hits, no runs, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. He stays as Major League Baseball's ERA leader, 0.84. Just unbelievable stuff from him. There's nothing much more to say. I know you've talked about a lot of how he uses his pitch mix, but even just quickly, like how is he continuing to do this as we go further into the season? Guys are getting more looks at him, especially now you're facing teams multiple times. How is he still able to be this effective?
Diverse pitch mix. It's a broken record, forcing fastball, high carry, low release point. Command is stellar. I think the command has played up better than they expected. I think the slider has played up better than they expected, than the league expected. Otherwise, they would have paid Shota twice as much, 3 times as much that he ultimately was guaranteed with $52 million. Remarkable what he's doing. I am most surprised about Shota in that he's not flustered. The attitude that he presents on the mound is so confident. It's so sure of the process. The balance that you see with how he delivers pitches. He trusts himself so much. And we were talking about this. Shota is almost the perfect pitcher that you would want to mold. Someone with a unique pitch mix in terms of stuff. Someone who does not get flustered, who has confidence, and someone who has such a bulldog mentality with the emotion on the mound. Dexter Fowler Markey was talking about how there were certain guys in 2016 who had that type of mentality on the mound. Of course, he brought up your guy, John Lester. He talked about Jake Arrieta and having that stoic nature. He talked about John Lackey wanting to kill people on the mound. But all 3 of those mentalities were founded upon a sense of confidence and a surety in the process. You see that exactly with Shota Imanaga. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he does well. And on an every 4 or 5 day process, he's going to be ready to take the mound no matter the context.
Yeah, just really awesome stuff. He's very fun to watch. I also love, too, the Cubs put Showtime 120 on the marquee before the game yesterday. I like that. I don't recall them doing too many like personalized things for players on the board, like before you're walking in. But I was walking down Clark Street on Saturday to walk in at the marquee and just Showtime 120 on the marquee. I was like, this is cool. I like that. I like that, getting the vibes up for everybody. So that continues to be awesome. It's great. I thought, finishing on the positives, we all know, Javier Assad pitched earlier this week. He's great. He continues to just be a dog in this rotation, going out there and giving this team everything he has. He's a competitor, keeps the team in games, gives them a chance to win. He's been awesome for this team. And, again, another one of those guys where it's like, where would they be without him stepping up? We talked about so many guys needing to develop, take that next leap, earn, take hold of the opportunities they were given. Javier Assad has done that in spades. Just an incredible season so far from him. I thought Jamison Taillon looked pretty good on Sunday. He only goes 4 2/3, 6 hits, 3 runs, 2 walks, 4 Ks, and gives up the homer. But again, bad call early. I think he should have had strike 3 on, might have been the homer. But bad call. Some of the defense not great behind him. I think in general, Taillon has looked pretty good throughout this year, and certainly does not seem to have the major problem with command that he did last year. So any thoughts on Taillon quickly? And then I do want to talk about the 2 starts that did not go well this weekend against the Pirates.
Right back to negativity over here. Yeah. That's what you want to do? Okay, just making sure. Taillon, curveball, still looking at the shape. North to south, 10 inches of drop, 10 inches of horizontal. That's what you want to see from Taillon. So that's looking good. 4-seam looked the same as how it was the first few starts. Ideally, you want a little bit straighter, but still fine. Cutter commanded very well. Cutter used a lot. Sweeper used a lot. The splits he has this year against lefties versus righties represents that. So against righties, I think his WOBA was like under 280. Against lefties, I think it was around over 320, 330 going into today's start. So the 4-seam shape has to be good enough to survive lefties, but most importantly is that curveball shape. If the curveball shape is not where he wants it to be, then that lefty damage is going to go up. But against righties, with the sweeper performing well, the cutter performing well, he should have no problems going forward. Ultimately, what I think his projection comes down to is average to slightly better than league average value out of the rotation, and that's what the Cubs are paying him to be. So I'm fine with it. We would need Steele to come back to what we saw last season. We would need Imanaga to be somewhat this good going forward. Maybe ask him to be a sub-1 ERA is a little bit too much, but having Steele and Imanaga lead the rotation with Taillon providing average value is exactly what I think the Cubs need.
random thought, but because you brought up my guy John Lester, so I'm thinking about it. I don't know if he can hit, but I'm thinking, can you imagine the vibes if pitchers still hit in the National League and like Shota cranked one? You know he's got a bat flip in there.
Oh, absolutely.
He's pimping a home run for sure.
You know, I bet he can hit too. I bet he has a good swing.
I wonder. I'm sure they've talked about this before, but I do wonder.
I bet he can hit the ball farther than Nick Madrigal.
Well, I never.
I see that fast twitchiness,
and I can hit the ball further than Nick Madrigal.
Well, let's not get too crazy over here.
Come on.
You're probably right.
You don't believe me? You're taking Madrigal over me?
You're right. I'll pick Corey for who you got.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, I want to talk about Steele and Kyle Hendricks a little bit. Ducey from Edward in the chat, he says, win or lose, I enjoy watching the Corey and Brendan show on Sundays. Donnie agrees. Michael agrees. We appreciate that. Thank you for tuning in, especially after a loss. You know, we're over an hour here now after a loss on a Sunday. We appreciate you guys spending your time with us. Obviously, you know, sometimes Brendan and I don't agree on stuff. Often we in the chat do not always agree, but you know, we're all Cubs fans. We're all here to just talk about the game and experience the season together. So we appreciate you guys being here, and hopefully agree or disagree. It's a good conversation, an entertaining conversation, and maybe we all learn a little something from each other. So
do you learn from me? Do you learn from me, Corey? Do you pay attention to what I say sometimes?
I do.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate it.
And then I try to use some of that stuff in conversation and pretend like it's my own thought.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the problem with Taillon is this. People are like, oh, that's a good Yeah, I thought of that on my own. All right, let's talk about Justin Steele first. For me, Brendan, I think, you know, velo stuff, it looks pretty good. You know, obviously getting bit by the home run ball, too much hard contact, a little uncharacteristic for Justin Steele in these recent starts, but working his way back from a hamstring injury. It's only been a few starts. I got really no issue with what's going on. Wanted him to be better. This Pirates offense is not good. And again, like I said, you know, I was at that start on Thursday at beautiful historic Wrigley Field. Lot of hard contact. Just was not a good start, not a characteristic one of Justin Steele. But for a guy that was so good for this team last year and has shown you that he can do this at the major league level, a few starts coming back from, you know, even though it was only a month, it's a fairly significant injury. I got no problem letting him kind of ease his way back in there. And I think by the end of the year, he's going to be Justin Steele. He's going to be just fine.
2-pitch guy, right? We talked about Steele for a 2-pitch guy for the past year and a half. His last outing, 3-pitch guy, sinker, threw a sinker 11 times. Has not done that since maybe late 2022, perhaps. So it's been a while. He had talked about throwing changeups to our guy Ryan in the offseason. Didn't see that, but the sinker is some type of change that he might be exploring. Now, the change is coming when he's getting back to full health after a hamstring injury. Kind of surprising that he's doing that, but the stuff overall looks good. Fastball shape looks good. Velocity looks fine. Slider looks good. You look at the spray map from his overall location on the edges most of the time, probably fine. Now, the home runs and the hard hit contact, you would like to see decrease, but in 2 starts, stuff looks good. Curious about the sinker. Maybe someone can ask him about the sinker because I'm curious about it. We'll see how it goes. I have no concerns, or rather, I don't have a good reason to believe Steele is reverting based on 2 starts post hamstring injury when his stuff looks exactly the same. And the command is mostly okay.
Yeah, I think it'll be fine. I think it's I think he's also made 3 starts since coming back, but that's a separate semantic.
I'm sorry.
It doesn't make a difference.
Fire me.
I think again, like it's you know, shaking the cobwebs off. And I think similar to other things, like you'd like that to happen quicker, you'd like that to not be a thing. And you'd like him to kind of just revert back to being that Cy Young guy. But we saw so much last year. He was at times in the rotation the only guy you could rely upon. and had so many of those starts where the offense didn't score and things like that. Justin Steele has carried the burden for this team and, kind of willed this team on his back enough over the last year plus that I think we can let him shake the rust off in 3 starts before, thinking anything else. I have every bit of confidence that he will return to, and again, expecting a guy to be at the level of nearing, winning the Cy Young, that's a lot to ask, but I expect him to be a very strong top of the rotation starter soon enough. I wouldn't guarantee it next start, but he'll get there. He'll be fine. There's nothing in what he's doing under the hood or anything like that suggests we should be concerned about that at all.
Same with Kyle Hendricks too, right?
So let's talk about Kyle Hendricks. Before I do that, question from Everett in the chat. He says, do you guys do your Sunday show at the same time every week? Because I enjoy watching it. Appreciate that. We try to go live soon after the game ends. That's generally the plan. Occasionally, depending on the start time or schedules, just because it is a Sunday, maybe it'll be just more around 8 p.m. Central Time. But generally, we try to come on live as quickly after the game as we can, just like Cody, Luke, and Ryan do for the post-game shows throughout the week. We're on Sunday, and Brendan and I only have just us once a week, so we try to talk about the entire week that was, not just Sunday's game, but we try to come on as soon as we can after the game. So Hendricks, I don't know, man. I think it's pretty simple for me, basically. I think obviously he is not as fine and precise as he has been throughout his career. He's older. These things happen. But it's similar to how we talked a little bit about Adbert Alzolay, and they're very different pitchers, obviously. But one of the things we talked about with Alzolay was too much contact, doesn't get enough swing and miss, doesn't get the strikeouts, and sometimes bad stuff happens. This year, that contact has been a lot harder, and there's clearly a bigger problem than just not getting the swing and miss because he's not getting weak contact. But like that other start for Hendricks, he said after the game, he felt like he only made a few bad pitches, and otherwise it was a lot of just contact that found holes and found grass and stuff like that. I think he gave up a little more hard contact than he was admitting watching the press conference, but in general, that felt like a lot of it. But that's the deal, man. When you don't strike out enough guys and you give up too much contact and everybody is able to make contact, it's going to find holes. Man, that's just how this game works. And Kyle Hendricks has always been somewhat of a unicorn in that he has made a high 80s fastball work. He changes eye levels and speeds, some of the best we've seen in a long time out of a starting pitcher. But when you don't have that put away stuff and that overpowering stuff, all of that mechanics, location, changing eye levels, speeds, movement, it has to be perfect. And he just doesn't seem able to have that level of refinement at this point in his career. And again, this was against these 2 starts since he's come back, one of the worst offenses against right-handed pitching in the league. I think coming into one of these series with the Cubs, I'm not sure if it changed this weekend, the worst offense against right-handed pitching in the entire league. So when we're talking about like, well, maybe it was a few bad pitches and then he got dinked and dunked, his next start lines up against the Atlanta Braves, Brendan. And I don't think that contact is going to be soft liners that find grass, is my guess, if I had to predict how that outing would go if he indeed makes that start. So Wicks is still hurt. I think obviously you're seeing the value of a guy like Hayden coming out of the bullpen, Ben Brown coming out of the bullpen, and they need that help. But I'm not really sure. He looked fine in that first start against the Pirates. He did not look fine on Friday, and I fear for him being thrown if he's thrown to the Atlanta Braves. That is feeding him to the wolves if I've ever seen it.
Well, that just means he's going to go 6 innings and giving up only 1 or 2 runs. That how that turns out when you say stuff like that.
Yes. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I don't think you disagree with me.
No, I don't. There will come a time when the staff is healthy and the bullpen hopefully stabilizes, that if Kyle's performing this bad and the alternative option appears to be better, then we can have a discussion about should Kyle be throwing innings for this team. That time, as Craig Counsell says, is not there yet, where they have to get him right because Almonte has been shut down. Keegan Thompson recently put on the IL. Jordan Wicks is not back yet. We saw Taillon still not fully back to perhaps his full stamina, going 100+ pitches. Shota Imanaga only went 90-ish or so pitches because he expressed some fatigue after having 4 days in between starts. The decision for Kyle is going to come at a point when more information is understood about the entire pitching staff from starting rotation to the bullpen. I don't think it's quite there yet. The results are not good. The command was not good yet again. The changeup command in particular was not good against the Pirates in his recent outing. The sinker command, of course, was better than it was when he was getting shelled prior to the IL stint, but the results are not good enough. The DFA right now isn't going to happen. Craig Counsell has hinted at that. They've talked about that. It's not going to happen yet. So we have to go forward with understanding what he needs to do to succeed. If you're into all that, it's going to be sinker command and still showing the changeups and the whiffs. Kyle, you can believe him or not. I tend to believe Kyle. He felt like he made most of his pitches. I know you said in his post-game press conference that maybe he was not being aware of reality and the hard hit contact, but I do tend to trust what Kyle says. And if he's saying that he felt fine, that he feels better than he did when he started the season, okay, well, I have to trust that and assume that he's not being unaware of the reality. We'll see. There's going to come a point in time where if the results are this bad in a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, yes, we will have to have the discussion going forward of what makes sense to give the Cubs the best chance to win from an innings perspective.
Yeah, and I think part of the tough part of the decision is, as I said, like you clearly see the value of someone like Hayden Wesneski coming out of the bullpen. You see the value of Ben Brown pitching in the bullpen. And you also ask yourself, what value would Kyle Hendricks have out of the bullpen? It's probably none with that pitch mix and velocity and stuff like that. So that's part of what they're weighing. I said this, one of those times before, like they continue to start him. So there is a logic coming from this team, and that's what we're trying to figure out. So obviously, I think given that first start against the Pirates went pretty well, the leash is going to continue a little longer. Again, I would be terrified for him to face some of these Atlanta hitters, especially those strong lefties that he has. But with the rotation, and Wicks still hurt and things like that, and trying to find the value for guys to fix the bullpen or fix the rotate, this is the decision that they make. Obviously, this was not a good start. So the clock is definitely ticking. I know it's up if you look at our YouTube chat and I think on Twitter and stuff like that, but I think they're trying to do what they can with the options that they have available. So I wouldn't expect this continues much longer if the results are similar to Friday.
Yeah, I mean, once the staff is back to full health, then you have to have questions and discussions about this. That point has not arrived yet. So we'll see in the next few weeks.
And as I mentioned, getting to a good note, and then I think we'll talk about Brennen Davis, and then we can get out of here. But Ben Brown, he's a real asset at the back of that bullpen, and I think you're sort of seeing. Obviously, he's still getting that major league experience. This is the first year he's been in the majors. This is all new to him. But 2 innings on Sunday, just 1 hit, walked a guy, but struck out 3. And the stuff just looks really good, Brendan. Like as he continues to get experience, gets more experience in some high leverage spots and things like that, like you can really see the value that he would have to this team. I know long term they'd like him to be a starter, and you want to find as many starting options as you possibly can. But we've seen them introduce starters as relievers before. He was hit or miss in the starting opportunities that he got. And right now, this team needs the help in the bullpen, and you definitely can see the vision of how Ben Brown would fit into that.
Spectacular results from Ben Brown. knuckle curveball that he has, or as it's being classified, the death ball perhaps is a better description. 88, 90 miles per hour, north-south profile. Fastball is playing up. The question going in with Ben Brown was, can he get right-handed batters out with that 2-pitch mix? Does that curveball, because not many pitchers have that curveball, can it succeed against right-handed batters? The answer so far is yes. Absolutely yes. And that is great to see, because that pitch is known to play up against left-handed batters too, which means the platoon splits that many pitchers have should not be an expected problem for Ben Brown. Where the question with him is going to be asked by fans and even by the coaches is the development versus the max effort bullpen help that the Cubs need. Do you sacrifice some of Ben Brown's development by letting him max effort in the 8th inning, maybe in the 9th inning? Or do you, because it's May, do you let him continue getting these multiple inning roles and at times spot starts to promote his development, but by doing so, can't use him on back-to-back days, can't use him every other day, can't max effort him in the 8th inning? That's the question that will be fascinating to have. If it's September or late August and the bullpen needs high leverage arms, Ben Brown, hopefully by then, has had multiple outings in which he went multiple innings, then I would prefer to have Ben Brown as that late inning reliever, because his stuff looks very good in high leverage, similar to what Julian Merriweather throws. Right now, though, I'd be surprised if we're going to see Ben Brown in that 7th, 8th inning role, as many fans want to see, because there's still a need and questions about the Cubs starting pitching staff and just the ability to get innings as we stand in May. In July, August, maybe the conversation changes, but for now, Ben Brown's role has been exactly what this entire pitching staff has needed.
Yeah. All right. So let's finish on an outfield discussion real quick, and then we will get out of here. I think a tight 90 feels good today. We'll see. Brennen Davis. Brennen, once the Cubs' top prospect, dealt with a rash of injuries, had to have surgery on his back, worked his way back, struggled working his way back, more injuries, and here finds himself after just a torrid stretch that he is on. 91 at-bats so far in the 2024 minor league season. He hit 2 homers on Saturday. He's got 8 home runs on the year. His line, 264 with a 434 on-base percentage. He has a 1,005 OPS. Obviously, it's not the biggest sample coming back from the injuries, but he's performing at the AAA level. We're talking about how this team is not consistent from an offensive perspective. I don't know. I'm looking at going like, bring him up, give him a shot. He's earned it. He's gone through a ton. Try working his way back and even performing like this. Maybe it's too fast. I don't know.
No, call him up.
I'd like to see it, dude.
Call him up right now. Get on the phone. Get the bus, flight, whatever they use in Iowa to get him to Chicago. Call him up. Sample size. There's 2 ways to look at this that I think about. Large sample size success is great. I like to look at the blips. So when stuff is going as expected, all of a sudden, whoop, blips, right? This is a blip. It's very reminiscent of Christopher Morel's blip in plate approach and chase rate when he debuted. It's reminiscent to PCA's blip in contact rate early on. These are trends that were not expected, that deviate significantly from their projection, that require exploration, I think. For me, when we always talk about promotions and some lack of aggressiveness at times and past lack of promotions, maybe Matt Mervis in 2022, this is what I mean. Let's explore these unique, unpredictable trends and try to capitalize on whatever's happening right now. And in addition, maybe cement or amplify the changes they've made at the big league level. Maybe you put him in a big league environment, and those changes he's making, because the environment is so high stress, they get locked in. We've seen this happen so many times now in recent memory. PCA is maybe one of them, and Christopher Morel is one of them. The major league environment is so important to lock in adjustments and also expose weaknesses that need to be worked on. I want to see it. And that's completely separate from the fact that the Cubs need some type of pop right now.
Yeah.
They're going through a funk. Let's see what happens.
And so I think there's ways to make this work.
I already figured it out.
Steven says in the chat, Davis gets called up, demote Nick Madrigal. Would
Done.
love it, but Davis is an outfielder. Like at least until Nico and Dansby are back, they're going to keep the middle infielders. So hold on that. I'm for it. I'll drive the bus to Iowa. Trust me. But that one doesn't necessarily work. But with Ian Happ scuffling the way he has, Michael Busch has a 635 OPS in his last 30 games. Obviously, you want to give him the opportunities at the big league level, but he has scuffled a bit. So you have some guys on this team that maybe don't need to play every day and could benefit from Craig Counsell's, hey, this matchup is better. This matchup is better. This is not a good matchup for Michael Busch today. Let's not do this today. This is not a good matchup for Patrick Wisdom today. Let's not do this. I think you could make this work a little bit, at least in concept. Cody Bellinger can play first base. You have the DH spot. Christopher Morel looks fine at third base for the most part. I think he can handle that. I don't think you need him in that DH spot. PCA is getting the same treatment, sparing opportunity, coming into run, coming into bunt, getting those opportunities when they think it's an opportunity for him to hit. I think you can work with another outfielder. And I would love to see it. Brennen has earned it. As I said, he's gone through a ton. And when he's got this stretch going on, call him up and try to get it to happen at the big league level. You need the offensive help. I think it's worth it. And John says PCA needs at-bats too. Of course, it's a lot to manage, but that's why you pilfered and pay a manager a ton of money to figure this stuff out. The offense isn't performing at a level that is good enough. Figure it out. We're going to try to give you some more options. Hopefully Nico and Dansby get healthy, and you've got to figure out how to play all these guys. But right now, Ian Happ's not hitting. I don't think he needs to be in the lineup every day. And maybe they would argue that he needs to play every day and hit from both sides to regain that consistency. And I think by the end of the year, his numbers will look typically like they do. But the offense is killing this team right now. We've seen at times there's been stretches where the bullpen was what was killing this team. That's not what's happening right now. It's the offense, and sometimes you just need a jolt, and maybe Brennen Davis can provide that. Maybe Alexander Canario can provide it. It doesn't have to be one person, but what they're rolling out on a daily basis right now is not producing enough on a consistent level. And look, and as other people have said, I want to judge this lineup when Nico and Dansby are back in it because they're big parts of this. Nico is an excellent hitter. Dansby has proven to be a good hitter over the course of the years, and they're mainstays in this lineup. And that's what I want to judge, not a week where they played Miles Mastroboni and Nick Madrigal every day. But Nico and Dansby aren't those big time sluggers that are going to come up and, inherently save this offense. I think they lengthen the lineup and make it more consistent. As I said, you need these other guys to perform, which is why when they're not, maybe that's an area you just try something else. Maneuver things, have guys sit a day or two a week, DH a day or two, figure it out. But you need more offensive production. You have a former number one prospect for you that is exploding right now at AAA. I would give it a go. And if that means Ian Happ sits instead of hitting right-handed,
I don't think that needs to happen, though. I don't think the conversation is it Brennen Davis versus Ian Happ is necessarily the one.
No, but I'm saying it's not as though you do not need to have Ian Happ in left, Cody Bellinger in center, and Seiya Suzuki in right every single night. You can maneuver these things. That's my only point.
Yeah, the way it could work is you get the middle infield back, Dansby and Nico come back, and you actually do option Mastroboni or Madrigal, and then you can move Bellinger to first base, reduce the plate appearances from Michael Busch or Patrick Wisdom, have center field be occupied by Mike Tauchman or PCA, have the DH spot then be used by Brennen Davis or say Suzuki and give Brennen Davis reps in right field.
In there too, yeah.
Yeah, so it can work out. It's how basically the reduced way of how it could work out is you subtract plate appearances from two guys, Patrick Wisdom, and Michael Busch. I don't think Ian Happ needs to be included in the discussion. Although, yeah, if you want to give Patrick Wisdom and Michael Busch more opportunities and subtract from Ian Happ, sure. But I don't think it's required to get Brennen Davis at bats. I think it comes down to middle infield health, which hopefully returns on Tuesday, and then a discussion of Michael Busch's funk and Patrick Wisdom's potential. That's the discussion. I would like to see more Brennen Davis. I'm fine in the current going, taking away at bats from Michael Busch and Patrick Wisdom to explore what you have with Brennen Davis.
Yeah, me too. Real quick, what is driving? What do you think is what is going on with Ian Happ? What is driving this funk for him? Because it's one of those where a guy's in a funk, and I think this was also the fine folks at Bleacher Nation that tweeted this out. I think one of the called strikeouts he took today was a fastball that was 94 down the pipe. And it's like, that's how you know a guy's scuffling. Like, he's just staring at fastballs down the middle of the plate for strikeouts. He's just lost in his head. What is driving this for Ian Happ?
He's done this before. 2023 was such a stabilizing season for him that how he performed in 2021 and 2022 may have been forgotten a little bit. I do have a chart here, actually. I can show this. So if you look at his whiff rates, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024, you're going to see an obvious trend immediately pop up. And the trend is that in 2021, 2022, you get these variable swing rates, and in 2023 it just kind of stabilizes. This is what it looks like. So in orange is 2021. This is his whiff rate, or swinging strike rate to be more precise. Anything higher, it means he whiffs more on a per 75 pitch window. This actually might be a 25. No, this is a 75 pitch window. This is correct. So in 2021, you see it's more variable. So he goes through stretches and slumps of whiffing a lot, and then he goes back down. 2022 normalized a little bit, but still went through a lot of volatility. 2023, it just shrunk. The variance shrunk. He was more consistent. He didn't have the funks that he showed in the previous two seasons. 2024 is resembling more of what you saw in 2021 and 2022. Both those seasons, he put up well above league average offense. So he has done this before. And then recently, if you look at his overall exit velocity since the last 10 games, the exit velocity has gone back up. So he has proven that before May 5th, where he was not hitting the ball hard, he has shown signs of breaking out of that funk and actually having recent stretches that look like what we saw from Cody Bellinger over the past week and a half. So it's a difficult conversation, but I don't think it's an extreme one. I will say Dansby Swanson's extreme funk with the whiff rate earlier was way more outlier-ish than what we're seeing with Ian Happ. I do think it's premature to think, oh, Happ is like not going to be productive whatsoever. That's not necessarily the case, because he looks like what he looked like in 2021 and 2022 when he performed above an average offensive producer.
We have breaking news, Brendan.
Is it bad or good? Is it bad or good?
Good, I think. We don't know the other side of it, but
what is it?
ESPN's Jorge Castillo, who is getting this report from his aunt, who is Luis Vasquez's mother.
Okay.
Luis Vasquez is being promoted to the Chicago Cubs.
You know what happened? Jed's watching this.
the
He's like, you know what? He gets his phone out. I'm calling up Luis Vasquez.
Yeah.
You're welcome, Chicago. Corey and I have done it. We have personally brought Luis Vasquez to Chicago. Who's going down?
I do not see a corresponding move.
It's going to be Nico, isn't it?
Brendan, if they put Nico on the IL,
it's going to be
now.
Nico. No, it's going to be Nico.
Not doing it.
It's going to be Nico.
Don't even get me started.
100% going to be Nico.
Why couldn't it just be Mastro and Madrigal being optioned down?
It's going to be Nico. I think it's what it's going to be.
Brendan, if they put him on the IL after playing down a man for 6 games.
So that's what it's going to be.
I'm not on the show on
I
Monday,
can't.
but I already know my guy Cody Delmendo will handle the yelling about that. For that, it better not be that.
I mean, maybe honestly, Mastrobuoni was so bad today, like defensively, that like
he has
what
like
this.
a 10 WRC plus.
But like, dude, did you see Mastroboni like make some of those like awful plays? Like the internal clock at shortstop's not calibrated, and like to his defense, he's not played there consistently. So I get that, but it's just not. It's not working.
Okay. Well, so quickly before we wrap up, I mean, I think you guys already know our thoughts on this. I think we talked about Luis Vasquez maybe a couple weeks ago for the first time or something like that. But I think at the very least, he's a really good defender. And you know that wherever he's playing, whichever middle infield spot he's playing, and even if Nico and Dansby are both back on Tuesday and he's just that new depth piece, you know that you have a really good glove to fill in when those guys are not able to play. And the bat has more potential than the two guys that you were giving those starts to offer. And maybe at least at the plate, Vasquez struggles just the same as Madrigal and Mastroboni, but so what? You're getting a better glove, and at least you're giving that opportunity to somebody new and seeing if they can provide more upside for you. So I am looking at Twitter at the moment. I am trying to get what that corresponding move is. I do not see it. So what I will tell you, as Brendan and I do kind of need to sign off here, keep an eye on our guys, Ryan Herrera, Jared Willis, and the CHGO Cubs Twitter feed. Of course, on the show tomorrow, Luke, Cody, Ryan, they will discuss whatever the corresponding moves are. We'll keep you posted. But I don't see, at least as we are going to end this show, I don't see what the corresponding move is, for Luis Vasquez. But I'm glad that he's coming up. I'm glad that he's getting the opportunity. And I'm glad that they will be trying that, whether that is as a bench depth piece or to fill in for Nico or Dansby for whatever time that is necessary. This is the better choice. It may offensively work out just the same, but defensively it'll be better, and at least you're trying something else. So
I'm all about it. Defense is top notch.
I wish they had done this a week ago.
He's one of those gloves that when you see for the first time, you think, oh, yeah, that looks good. There's no question marks there. He's one of those guys defensively. The bat, the pop, we'll see what happens. But I'm just asking, field the baseball shortstop, have a calibrated internal clock, make the plays, and protect your pitchers. Luis Vasquez can do all of that.
Yep. So I think that's what we have for you. So we will... Cubs apparently are making some roster moves, so keep an eye on all of that stuff. Like I said, all the socials will have this stuff and keep you guys updated. But Brennan and I got to get out of here. We appreciate you tuning in. Hit that like button, that thumbs up if you're watching on the YouTube feed on your way out. We will both be in the CHGO Sports Studios on Tuesday to join the crew for the Tuesday night shows. So you can look forward to that. That will be Brendan and I's first time in the studio together.
Wow.
So that is interesting. You can see us in the same room. We are both real people and can exist in the same room together. Keep an eye on those roster moves. And I don't know, keep perspective. It's May. Let's see what happens. Let's let this team get healthy. Let Jed make some moves and see if they can stabilize some of this stuff. But Brendan and I will talk to you on Tuesday, but we will be back for this show, the Sunday edition of the CHGO Cubs podcast, next Sunday. We appreciate you guys tuning in, your support, and we will talk to you again soon. As always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.